I'm Glen McInnis. First on the program, would you if it means paying more?
100%. You got to support local.
But it's always tough because not everything that I like buying is available local.
I think that it's a healthier choice for us and our children and our grandchildren.
They're not a big corporation, so.
But first, since the Queen's passing last year, there's been renewed discussion on whose face should grace our currency in the years to come. Some may want a prominent Indigenous or even non-Indigenous Canadian, while others may want to stick with tradition, which would feature monarchs or past Canadian prime ministers. So, who do you want to see on our money? We sent our cameras out with this question.
Whose image would you like to see on future Canadian currency?
I think it was a shame that they took John A. Macdonald, our first prime minister, off the $10 bill. I think they should put him back on the $20 bill.
I think anyone that has broken down barriers or make a change in the life of people or have made a change or a difference in the community should be honored on the currency of future currency.
Well, I was thinking about this as I was walking by and I heard the question and I thought, there's a couple things I'd like to see. I would like to see landmarks, provincial landmarks, like have a series of bills that represent each province. Like we've got Pier 21 or, you know, the Canadian Mint or the Human Rights Museum or, you know, all that kind of stuff. But then as I thought about it more, I have a daughter that's Inuit, and I think that our Indigenous people have been betrayed by Canada, but they've also been heroes. And I think that we need to have a focus and an honorary position for the Indigenous people in our country.
I like the way Canada is going the diversity route about and putting people from different backgrounds on currency. That's kind of a good move.
I think that we should have someone that's more current in our country right now as the symbol of our currency. A lot of people would say the king, but I really feel that Canada should start becoming more independent.
Terry Fox was definitely the first one in my mind. I'm not fully knowledgeable on every Canadian leaders, but Terry Fox definitely had so much impact into our country. Ever since I was in elementary school, we did a bunch of walks for Terry Fox since I was in grade 3. So it's always something that's been talked about. So if anything, I would actually say that he should be on any type of bill, since he made so much of an impact and people still talk about him to this day and throughout the world.
I don't have a strong feeling about it, but I guess I lean on the side of tradition, so I guess King Charles is fine. I'm okay with that.
I think probably Canadian people on the currency would be great, and an Indigenous icon would also be great.
Terry Fox would be a good example, yes.
Okay. So,
took it up front, didn't it?
Why do you think Terry Fox?
Oh, because he represents Canada and he represents the values of Canada.
I don't know, maybe mine? Why not, right? Yeah. Wouldn't that be the ultimate?
You're a taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly. And I use enough of it. So, yeah, why not?
Okay, what about you, sir?
I think having King Charles on there would make sense, I guess, since the Queen's on it before. Yep.
So stick with King Charles.
Sure.
I think Indigenous peoples across the country have largely been ignored in terms of their contributions to the makeup of Canadian history. So I think it would bode well in terms of advancing Canada's reconciliation agenda. It would bode well in terms of recognizing people that haven't historically been recognized in terms of Canada's history. So that would just kind of be my suggestion, someone from the Indigenous community.
I think I'd like to see Buffy St. Marie. So there.
And why?
And why? Because I think she represents Canada, and she also is a truth speaker, I guess, is what you would call her. And she really inspires me.
I think
Terry Fox would be good. I think Terry Fox would be a really good example as a perfect person to put on Canadian money. I think Terry Fox is one.
Tommy Prince was a war hero. He really presented himself in a good way for us people, his family. So I really honor him, and I don't think there's enough honor for him.
To be honest, I don't think we should have people's images on Canadian monetary. I think it creates controversy where there isn't. There's better ways where we can respect people and create monuments and history without creating controversy on silly subjects like naming streets with people's names or just keep life simple, give people less reasons to be angry with the government, and wasting long hours of debate on things like whose name's on a street. Let's keep it simple, let's go to numbers, and keep less controversial things out of it.
It could be argued that China's presence on the world stage seems a little more ominous these days, and the relationship between our two countries has never been more strained. Back in 2015, Justin Trudeau promised to strengthen ties with China. But soon after came the detention of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou here in Canada, then the detention of the two Michaels in China. Add to that allegations that China has been meddling in the Canadian election process. There's no simple answer on how to deal with such a large and influential country. Some Canadians may feel we're not doing enough, while others may feel we should be more cautious when dealing with the Chinese government. Cameras out to ask Canadians what our approach should be. Our question:
how should Canada deal with China?
I think that, it's important to approach in whichever way is, it's not going to create any conflict. I think that's a big thing. I've heard a lot in the news that there's been a lot of conflict and espionage with China. So I think they should just deal with it in whichever way is not going to escalate any of our situations right now.
Oh, I would start expelling the ambassador. I would definitely take drastic measures about it. I mean, they've been interfering with us for a long time. They're buying our natural resources. Now they're interfering with elections. We knew about that. This government knew about it, but they ignored it. There's a lot of things we can do.
So to be honest with you, I think anybody who interferes in our elections, and I don't know who leaked it and what, and I wasn't here. It was a big talk at the lunch today I was at, and I was kind of not knowledgeable on it. But I think with our elections externally, we should take proactive actions against. But I think our proactive be holistic versus piecemeal. We are a small nation, big geography, we're 40 million people, and we should be very systematic in our approach with our allies on that.
Well, the first question that we should really ask is, do we really live in a democracy? That's the real question. But really, I don't think China is making a big difference. It is what it is.
Oh, I think just more and more keeping our distance and keeping away and continuing to further our investigation of possible or probable election interference and manipulation.
I think this country should deal with China cautiously, but I think that nothing is ever black and white. So we need to have nuance and understand that if we continue with us versus them mentality, that won't benefit anyone, China or Canada.
Carefully. Honestly, I think the approach of the current appointment of, I forget his name now. Yes, David Johnson is a very good move, and then we'll see where it goes from there in terms of the inquiry that happens through this public process.
The government needs to really do a better job at explaining to Canadians what's happening with the relations, because especially with the election interference we're seeing now, it seems they're not doing a very good idea of telling Canadians what's actually happening.
Well, I think you have to be careful because China, controls a lot of the world economy, but I still think we should take a tough stance and defend Canada wherever we can. So if we have to push back a little bit, I know we're limited because we don't have as much power in the world stage, but I think we should use what resources we have to protect our position.
So I can't tell you how we should deal with China, but I do think we should take interference in elections seriously from all quarters, not just China. and really try to figure out what's going on and how to prevent it and not play political games around it.
We need to hold the course. I think Trudeau has the right idea. I think I agree with them being a little stern with them, because I don't think it's a country that we should let bully us.
Like Canada stood up for themselves against big countries before. We've stood up to the Americans when we had to, and there's no problem standing up to other big countries like China right now. It's our time to stand up, maybe, and stand up for ourselves, and make sure that our way of living is what's going to happen in our country. So.
We don't want to be enemies with China, or vice versa. Huh? I think we should just be family oriented. We're all sharing the same lands. And I think that we should be supporting and walking together in a better future for those young ones.
I don't think there'll be any significant change in our China policy, because they are too large of a market for Canadian companies not to put influence on politicians. So the way we deal with China is by creating term limits and creating policies that care about the people, not about keeping themselves in power.
Probably the same way the United States under sanctions. I believe China is actually becoming a global threat.
I think Canada should try to make more stuff itself, like the things, especially the things that are important for the people, like medications and vaccines, but other things too, to be less dependent on what China does. It is good for our own economy too.
And I feel like if China has these police stations that we're talking about, they're terrorizing their own people. Now, if they want to do that in their country, that's fine. But we have a human rights system in our country, and it's not fine. And it's time for our Prime Minister, and it's time for our politicians to stand up and say, not in my house.
In what year was Justin Trudeau first elected to Parliament? 2004, 2008, or 2015?
2015.
2008.
I think 2015.
I'm going to say 2015.
2004.
2015.
I would say 2008.
You are absolutely correct.
Oh, phew.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the...
I will.
Have a
Take
great
care.
day.
Bye.
Justin Trudeau, current Prime Minister, first decided to follow in his father's footsteps and run for federal politics in 2007, where he would win the federal riding nomination of Papineau, Quebec. He was first elected to the House of Commons in the October 2008 federal election under Liberal leader Stéphane Dion. Trudeau would be re-elected in 2011, 2015, 2019, and 2021.
A report by CSIS, Canada's spy agency, says climate change could pose a national security threat to Canada. Receding ice levels in the region and an increased presence in Arctic waters via the Northwest Passage could result in increased Russian and Chinese activity in the area. The report also says parts of British Columbia's coast and the Atlantic provinces could be lost due to rising sea levels. We sent our cameras out to ask if this issue will have an effect on our sovereignty and our safety. Our question:
do you believe climate change poses a national security threat?
As far as Canada goes, I do believe that the climate is changing. I don't think that humans impact it as much as the government would fearmonger us into believing, especially Canada. We contribute less than 1% of all emissions in the world. You could drop Canada off the face of the earth, it wouldn't make a difference to climate. So why is our government bankrupting Canada and Canadian businesses to go green when China, India, all those countries are not doing anything? They're doing nothing, and they're the big polluters.
Yes. It's horrendous. Last year I traveled to the ice fields in Alberta, and I'd been there 15 years before that, and I was horrified to see the difference in the ice fields. And that really was a wake-up call. So it's very, very serious. And we do live on, we have a lot of coastal line.
I think it's happening. It's happening right now. Climate change is happening to us with our weather. It's just unpredictable. I think that we assume too many things. We take things for granted. And I think it's time that we start to listen to the earth, to the nature, and to the creation. And that we are not the boss, we are not in control, but to react and respond to a way that is comfortable for us, and to appreciate what Mother Earth is bringing our way.
Well, I think it poses a security threat to our country, Canada, and therefore the world, because it affects how the storms, the cyclones, all the weather that has been changing, and anybody who has lived longer than 20 years or so has seen that now, how it's affecting the world and economically, and just for the populations in general. And so I think that we really need to look at that. It's a serious threat to all of us. And I pray for my grandchildren that they will have a healthy climate to grow up in.
I definitely don't think that climate change is a national security threat. I think that the Earth's climate has been changing forever, and I think there possibly is some concerns we should address when it comes to the environment, but I think steps need to be taken slowly and not in a manner that affects our economy.
Yes, because if you look at things happening in the United States, it's out of control there. The weather is so erratic. It's not nearly as bad here, but it should be actually addressed in the same way as a national security issue.
Well, I think in the longer term, of course, it does pose risks and threats in terms of fires, in terms of rising sea levels. But Canada probably is less influenced than many other countries. If you think of the United States right now with their fires in California, if you think of rising sea levels with low-lying countries. So yes, it's an existential threat. Canada is much better positioned than most other countries in order to deal with the effects of climate change.
I think it definitely has an impact on national security. I'm not sure it's as extreme as perhaps what they're making it out to be. The weather in general over time changes, but certainly I think that we need to be conscious of it for sure for the next generations. We've got to try to do what we can, but doing the few things like having paper straws instead of plastic ones, silly. I think we've got much bigger issues globally than that here.
A bigger fish to fry than global warming, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I think it does. But I think that right now, the relationships between Russia and Ukraine, the relationship with China, and now they're partnering with Russia and starting to meet again, we've got way bigger fish to fry. Inflation and jobs and all those things. So in my opinion, we should be focused on that. I think BC 11 is going to be critical. To me, again, that's way more important right now than worrying about climate change affecting our national security.
Absolutely. Why? Because it will change absolutely everything of the way that we work and live and how people make money. It will change if we don't take an inclusive approach. And so when we transition to lower carbon technologies, for instance, we want to make sure that women and men both benefit. And if we don't, then I think that we will see lots of unrest and even more inequality than we already have in this country, and that's unacceptable. Unacceptable. As Canadians, we shouldn't accept that.
Absolutely. I'm actually originally from Nunavut, so I think it does pose a national security threat, whether that's a threat to our sovereignty or a threat to our infrastructure, in terms of ease of access to the Northwest Passage, ease of access to the Arctic. I think climate change is definitely one of those things that does pose a national threat.
I have to be out west with the fires, and I live in Edmonton. We were under smog from BC wildfires. But warming, because I just exhibited like a few weeks of minus 30 back home. But there's definitely chaos, and it is definitely a national disaster. We need to look at our infrastructure for power. We need to look at our infrastructure for telecommunications. And we need to look at our infrastructure for things like water, right? Like as a nation, right? Like, so I wouldn't just blame climate change. I'd blame our preparedness towards that chaos that we're experiencing.
I think I'm not sure how quickly, but yes, I believe that I'm worried about the effects of climate change and how it could impact, especially along our coastline, where the water levels could rise significantly over the next number of years. So I think we're aware of it, try to do what we can to control whatever we have control of.
Well, I mean, climate change puts us all at risk. It makes resources more scarce. It makes weather more unpredictable. And so anytime you have situations where people are worried, then I would say our security is at risk.
Small businesses have often been called the backbone of our economy, and people spending money at these local businesses is a great way of infusing money back into their communities. However, with costs rising everywhere you look, many people are priced out from buying local and are forced to shop at the big box stores who can afford to charge lower prices. With tougher economic times upon us, some Canadians may have to hold off from buying local just to make ends meet. So, where does this sit with you? Our question.
Would you buy local even if it means paying more?
Sometimes we do pay more, and we have to pay more because of scale of businesses. But I certainly think that that's a strong push we need to have for sure.
No, I do try and buy local, but it's always tough because not everything that I like buying is available local. But in terms of food, groceries, services, retail, yeah, I do prefer to buy local.
I do believe in supporting small businesses, but I do understand that it's not because a lot of people are dealing with financial problems. A lot of people are going for no-name brands because of the price freeze, and a lot of us just want to just keep what we have. And I feel like a lot of people shop locally for rent to pay. I might, but I think it depends on the circumstances for me. But I do believe that we need to support each other locally because we need to build up Canada's local business sector. So yeah.
It's definitely more expensive. I can tell you I love my eggs. They're nice and orange that I buy, and they're around 30% premium. I can afford it. But that's not what everybody else can. And no salary increases met inflation as we see it. So I'm not a financial person, but I don't know if the cost of COVID caused us to have that 20% plus person experience. But we survived through it, and I'm okay. I can afford to eat like all the rest of us. So
I always lean towards trying to support local businesses wherever possible. So I personally am willing to support local businesses.
No.
You want to elaborate?
Oh, well, just the cost. Cost is a luxury. Buying local when the cost is significantly higher than everything else. If it's a question of balancing off how much you buy, how much you eat, the quality of your food versus buying local, well, it's an expense that just doesn't weigh it off.
If I can, because I like living in a vibrant community where there's lots going on locally, and I like being able to reach things on foot if I can and get the things I need on foot. And I know that's become weirdly a privilege in our society, and I don't think it should be.
100%. You got to support local. You got to support your neighbors, your communities. Yeah, 100% on that.
I think it's. I don't think price is the issue. I think the issue is supporting one another. Kitchen, sharing the food. I think that that's what we need.
Yes. In all means, we're a local small business. We have that mentality. Don't get me wrong, I like a deal like the next person, but local business is where it all starts. Keeping the local economy strong keeps a strong Winnipeg, strong Manitoba, strong Canada. It's an important initiative.
Yes, because when I am in the grocery shop, I always check where my stuff comes from. And even if it is a little bit more expensive, I am willing to pay that because I know people in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or in Canada make a living of it, and not some abroad where people are forced to work.
I would. I think it's important to support our local economy, especially coming from a small town. To buy local means you're supporting real people.
Yes, because in my opinion, I believe that local businesses need more money, and that goes to the actual people, not big corporations. So I would gladly pay more if it was a local business owner running the place, because I just believe that it's just more moral to give them more money, because the thing is, they run that business themselves.
I would prefer to buy local. For one thing, it's I believe that local farming, this type of thing, that we're probably getting a better product without so many preservatives. This kind of thing, we're also supporting our local economy, which is very important, especially in smaller areas. And I think that it's a healthier choice for us and our children and our grandchildren.
Yes, I would. I actually do buy local more so than big box stores. I feel like here our local farmers and people who produce anything locally, it's more important to them. It feeds their families. And in the long run, my community is more important than the larger box stores, productive. So I try and support it as much as possible.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on CPAC. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. I'm Glen McInnis, and on behalf of my colleagues at the Cable Public Affairs Channel, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.